There's a boy standing at the edge of a well, and his own brothers are the ones about to throw him in. Not strangers, not enemies, his brothers. The same blood, the same father, the same dinner table he sat at the night before. And as they grab him, as fear rises in his chest, something strange happens that most people who've heard this story 100 times still miss. Allah doesn't wait until Yusuf climbs out of that well to speak to him. Allah speaks to him while he is still falling. Surah Yusuf, verse 15, tells us that Allah revealed to him in that very moment, "You will surely inform them of this affair of theirs while they do not perceive." A 12, maybe 17-year-old boy, alone in the darkness of a pit, and Allah is already telling him how the story ends. That's where I want to start with you, because everything Yusuf goes through after this is not a punishment. It's a preparation. And once you understand that, you will never look at your own hardest days the same way again. Let's go back a bit, because the pit doesn't come out of nowhere. It starts with a dream. In the opening verses of Surah Yusuf, young Yusuf runs to his father, Yaqub, peace be upon him, and tells him he saw 11 stars, the sun and the moon, all prostrating to him. And Yaqub, a prophet himself, immediately understands the weight of what his son just said. He doesn't celebrate it out loud. Instead, in verse 5, he tells Yusuf something that should stop you cold. Do not narrate your vision to your brothers, lest they devise a plan against you. Indeed, Shaitan, to man, is a clear enemy. Yaqub already knows jealousy is sitting in his own house. He can feel it, and he's right to feel it, because his other sons had been watching their father's love for Yusuf and his younger brother grow, and something ugly had been building quietly for years. In verses 8 and 9, we hear their actual plot, whispered among themselves. They say Yusuf and his brother are more beloved to their father than they are, even though they are a stronger group. And then one of them says the words that should chill you. Kill Yusuf, or throw him into some distant land, so your father's attention turns only to you. Imagine sitting in a room with people plotting your death, and you have no idea. That's the world Yusuf is walking into the next morning, when his brothers ask their father to let him come out and play with them. Yaqub hesitates. He tells them in verse 13 that it grieves him to let Yusuf go, and that he fears a wolf may eat him while they're not paying attention. But they convince him, they promise, and he lets go of his most precious son, not knowing he is handing him over to the very people who want him gone. And out in that empty land, away from every eye that could protect him, they throw him into the well. Here's something most retellings skip completely. In verse 18, when the brothers come back to their father with a shirt soaked in false blood, claiming a wolf had eaten Yusuf, Yaqub doesn't fully believe them. He says something that has echoed through history ever since. Rather, your souls have enticed you to something, so patience is most fitting. And Allah is the one sought for help against what you describe. Fasabrun jamil, beautiful patience. Not patience that complains quietly while looking calm on the outside. Beautiful patience is patience with no bitterness in it at all. Patience that trusts Allah completely, even while the heart is breaking. Yaqub will carry this exact phrase again later in the story, and when you get there, you'll understand just how much it cost him to say it twice. Meanwhile, down in that well, a caravan passes by. In verse 19, a water drawer lowers his bucket and instead of water, pulls up a boy. Good news, he says. Here is a boy. And just like that, Yusuf becomes merchandise. Verse 20 tells us plainly that they sold him for a few dirhams, a low price, because they were not attached to him. Think about that phrase for a second. A future prophet of Allah sold cheaply by people who had no idea what they were holding. That's often how divine plans move through the world, quietly, disguised as ordinary transactions, while the people involved have absolutely no clue what they're actually part of. Yusuf ends up in Egypt, in the house of a nobleman, the Aziz, whose wife would later become one of the most famous figures in the entire Quran. As Yusuf grows into a young man, Allah describes him in verse 22 as someone given wisdom and knowledge, a reward for doing good. But growing up beautiful, in a position of trust, inside the home of a powerful and unhappy woman becomes its own test, one far harder than the well. In verse 23, she locks the doors and calls him to herself. And Yusuf, alone, with every worldly reason to give in and every social pressure pushing him toward it, says one sentence that has been the anchor for young men and women fighting temptation ever since. I seek refuge in Allah. Indeed, He is my master, who has made good my residence. Indeed, wrongdoers will not succeed. He runs, actually runs, toward the door. And in verse 25, in the chaos of that moment, his shirt gets torn from behind as she grabs him trying to stop him, and they find her husband right at the door. Now here's what's fascinating. The evidence itself becomes the proof of his innocence. A witness from her own household suggests, in verse 26 and 27, that if his shirt is torn from the front, she is truthful and he is lying. But if it's torn from the back, then she has lied and he is truthful. The shirt was torn from the back. He was running away, not toward her. Even here, in what should be a moment of vindication, Yusuf doesn't get freedom. He gets silence. Society still whispers. And eventually, even though everyone around him knows the truth, he ends up in prison anyway, simply to quiet the rumors. And in verse 33, Yusuf says something almost unbelievable for a man who did nothing wrong. He says prison is more beloved to him than what they call him to. He would rather lose his freedom than lose his obedience to Allah. Sit with that for a second, because most of us would take the opposite deal without thinking twice. In prison, two men have dreams and ask Yusuf to interpret them. Before he even answers, he uses the moment to speak about Allah, about leaving the ways of people who don't believe, about the oneness of Allah, verses 37 through 40. He tells one man he will be freed and serve his king wine again, and tells him, in verse 42, to mention him to his king. But the man forgets. Verse 42 says Yusuf remained in prison for several more years because of that forgetfulness. Years, not days, not weeks, years, sitting in a cell after doing everything right, after resisting temptation with everything he had, after interpreting a dream with wisdom, still forgotten by the very person who could have freed him. If you've ever done the right thing and felt like the world completely ignored it, this part of the story was written for you. Eventually, the king himself has a dream nobody in his court can interpret. 7 fat cows eaten by 7 thin ones, and the cupbearer suddenly remembers Yusuf. Yusuf interprets it with precision in verses 46 through 49. 7 years of abundance followed by 7 years of famine, and gives an actual plan to survive it. The king wants to bring him out immediately, but watch what Yusuf does here, because this is where his character reaches its peak. He refuses to leave prison until his name is cleared publicly. In verse 50, he sends the messenger back and says, "Go ask the king about the women who cut their hands, so my lord will know that I did not betray him in his absence." He doesn't want freedom with a shadow still hanging over him. He wants the truth spoken out loud, even if it takes longer. And that's when the wife of the Aziz, the very woman whose accusation put him there, finally says the words everyone had been waiting years to hear. In verse 51, she admits it herself. Now the truth has become evident. It was I who sought to seduce him, and indeed he is of the truthful. From there, the story moves fast, almost as if Allah is rewarding every year of patience with speed. Yusuf becomes the one placed in charge of Egypt's storehouses in verse 55. The years of famine come, and his own brothers, the same brothers who threw him into a well, come to Egypt for food, not recognizing the powerful man standing in front of them. Yusuf recognizes them instantly, and instead of revenge, in verse 92, when the truth finally comes out and his brothers stand before him terrified, he says words no ordinary human being says after everything he endured. No blame will there be upon you today. Allah will forgive you, and he is the most merciful of the merciful. His father Yaqub, who had cried until his eyes turned white with grief. Verse 84 is finally reunited with the son he thought was gone forever. And in verse 100, Yusuf raises his parents onto the throne, and they all fall down in prostration before him. And he says, "This is the fulfillment of my dream from before. My Lord has made it true." The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was once asked who the most noble of people was, and he answered, as recorded in Sahih al-Bukhari, that it was Yusuf, the Prophet of Allah, son of the Prophet of Allah, son of the Prophet of Allah, son of the close friend of Allah. 4 generations of nobility, and still Allah let him fall into a well, into slavery, into a prison cell, into years of being forgotten before he ever touched a throne. Because the pit was never the punishment. The pit was the beginning of the plan. And if Allah could turn a well into a palace for a boy who was patient, imagine what your own well is quietly being turned into right now. If this story moved you even a little, that's exactly why I make these. If you'd like to support the work behind them, there's a Buy Me a Coffee link in the description. Every little bit genuinely helps me keep going. I also just started sharing daily Islamic reminders on Instagram, Pinterest, and X. Simple posts made to be shared with anyone who needs a reminder that day. The links are in my channel bio. Come follow me there. I've also opened a Gumroad shop, link in the description, and I'd love to know what you'd want to see there. If there's a product, a guide, or a resource you wish existed, tell me in the comments. I'm building this around what actually helps you. Right now, I'm also working on something close to my heart, a pocket dua book, made to be simple and easy to carry with you. If you want to be the first to know when it's ready, subscribe so you don't miss the update.